start somewhere and know your why, know why you're doing it. Because if it's okay to want to feel good about yourself, but don't let that blur the vision of you getting the praise instead of God, or it being more about you and less about the people that you're impacting.
Hi, I am Wachira, a corporate girl who also has multiple passions. When I'm not at my 9 to 5, I spend time focusing on growing my small side business that I love. I created From Stack to Unstoppable podcast to give you simple, actionable strategies to help you get unstuck from limiting beliefs and find your purpose. If you're a professional, a 9 to 5er, or an aspiring entrepreneur, and are looking to get out of your comfort zone, use your God-given talents and passion, you, my friend, are in the right place. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of From Stack to Unstoppable podcast. I am your host, Wachira. Today on the show, I have Priscilla Wachira. Priscilla is a PhD candidate at the Texas Women's University. She's also a self-published author of a book titled Seated, A Journey to Becoming. She is also a licensed psychologist. Now, Priscilla wears many hats, and she is currently the Kenyan Cultural Ambassador for Miss Kenya USA. In this conversation, we talk about Priscilla's journey from Kenya to the USA. We talk about the unconscious biases that she's had to face as a person of the Akorino faith, and you will not believe how gracefully she handles these biases. We also talk about her book and why she wrote it, and we also talk about her journey to becoming the cultural ambassador for Miss Kenya USA. So, friends, help me welcome Priscilla in. Hi there, Priscilla. Thank you very much for being on my show.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor, and I was delighted when you reached out. I said, okay, news travels, and it's found me well.
The news found you well, and I'm so honored that those news found you well. Now, for those who don't know you, please tell my listeners who you are and what you do.
Yes, so I'm Priscilla Wachira, and I am currently a PhD candidate for the Education, Leadership, and Organizational program at Texas Women's University. I'm also a licensed professional counselor, a daughter, a friend, a community champion. So a little bit about me, and Miss Kenya USA Cultural Ambassador.
Beautiful. And we'll talk about all that. Now, Priscilla, you and your family moved from Kenya to the US, and you're the youngest in your family. You were a baby. So you've grown, or you've known all your life has been spent in America. How was that journey?
So I would say for me, it was an advantage because I was able to grasp the culture quickly. Moving here at 6, going on 7, I was very curious. My mom tells a story of how I ran off the plane. You know how the plane lands, and of course, there's that moment of sitting on the runway. But I took off the minute the door opened, and of course, they were understanding that she's just a little one.
Right.
But I think that highlights my eagerness to come to the United States and just take it all in. But growing up, I thank God I didn't have a lot of difficulties. It could be just naturally, I'm very friendly and outgoing. So I was curious, asked questions. And of course, in my accent, as you can hear, gathering the Southern slang was not difficult for me. So it was a good experience. And my dad did a good job of preparing us ahead of time to perfect our English. So we spoke English back in when we lived in Cayole before we moved to the States. And then when we moved to the States, he switched on us and now said, no more English because you're speaking it predominantly at school. Speak Kikuyu Swahili at home.
Nice. I love that. I love that curiosity that you jumped, when you got on the plane, off the plane, here you are, you touch the US soil and you're like, I am here,
Exactly.
bring it on type of thing. That's awesome. And I've had the honor of interviewing your siblings the last couple of weeks, and they talk highly about your parents. I know your parents, so talk a little bit about that upbringing and why and how that was being raised by, of course, your parents.
Yeah, so kudos. Hi, mom and dad. I know this is going to get to you, but my parents, honestly, my brother has a saying where he's been able to see far because he stood on the shoulders of giants, being my parents. And I can attest to that. My parents came here as most immigrants parents do, and they worked nonstop. I mean, I just remember one would come home at night and the other one is getting up to go. So it was almost a relieving of schedules.
Yes.
And they still made time to I look back, I was rambunctious in elementary school. And looking back, I think that was maybe a psychological thing in terms of getting attention, right? And trying to fit in. So the first years, let's say first to maybe fourth grade, adjusting to the learning style was difficult for me.
Mm.
And looking back, it wasn't that I was not intellectual enough, I just had been used to busy work. So my father, who was a teacher in Kenya, was just like, okay, this system is not understanding of my daughter's needs.
Mm.
So he was able to mitigate that. But what I'm trying to say there is, even in their busy schedules that I can now see looking back and have more clarity, they still made time to attend these meetings due to my behavior, which, sorry, mom and dad, now you can see the effects of it. But they were very gracious during our schooling to be present, whether that was maybe attending major events. They could not be at all of them.
Mm.
But I think they did their best to be available, even if it was showing up and standing in the back. And I could tell they were tired, but it meant that I get to say that day, oh, my dad came to one of my events. My
Yes.
dad came to a basketball game. And you don't realize what that means to children until you're in it.
Yes.
And most of the time, I thank my siblings because they ended up playing a role in being mom and dad and showing up to my senior events because my parents were working, and that was the reality. So
Right.
we did a lot.
That's very good that they were intentional, even with their busy schedules, because I do understand that. I mean, I have children, and I remember when they were growing up and I would attend their basketball games, like you're saying, their parent-teacher conferences. It was very important for them to see mom is there,
Right.
mom's here, and so that's very key, or dad's here for their recitals. So important. So would you say that that's where, because the three of you have this confidence, and I know the confidence comes from, it's God's confidence, but also you just have this, you exude a lot of confidence and just so much passion. Is that where it's coming from?
You know, I wrote a book called Seated, My Journey to Becoming.
Mm.
And that term confidence is something that you hear a lot. It's interesting when people reflect back who you are, but inside you say, wow, there's this journey that you may not know. And I think, again, thank you. And I think it's going to attest to the fact of that confidence came from literally being affirmed in who God said I was, because number one, there aren't a lot of Akorino people here. And
Mm.
so as you get older, as you start going back home to Kenya and then you're here, I think it was when I started interacting more
Yeah.
in Kenya and with other Akorino people that they were very welcoming. But at the same time, there's still that gap of, but you're different.
Mm.
And it's good different.
Mhm.
And so as I got older, I think that's when some of those puzzle pieces that you
Yes.
weren't paying attention to are missing, and you're just like, oh, something feels off.
Yeah.
And so the confidence has been a journey for sure. And thank you so much. I was circling back to your comment.
Mhm.
It has been affirmed through God and my parents,
Mhm.
really speaking to the fact that you didn't choose to be here. God chose for you to be here. And so because now you're balancing two different cultures, it's up to you to be a Moses, to lead the way, chart the way for others that look like you or maybe have walked through similar things as you have, and don't really know where they fit, but maybe they're not called to fit. Maybe they're
Right.
called to blend in both places. And so that confidence has come in from being affirmed by my parents and my purpose and calling. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Anytime, anytime. It shows in all of you, and it's very what's the word? I get it, like it's contagious. That's the word. It is contagious. So beautiful work, beautiful there. Now, I want to talk a little bit about that. That when you go home, when you go back to Kenya, do you travel back and forth to Kenya? So it
Yes.
seems, do you then have to, how is it, do you find that you have to maybe teach people? Because I do know that there's a little bit, there can be a little bit of some bias just because
Right.
of your faith and you're wearing the turban. Now, do we call it a turban for women?
Yeah, so I would say it's stateside here. The
Okay.
turban is definitely, that's what people know it as. But back home, it's the kilemba because
Limba,
there's
of course. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
but yeah, I still respond if it's turban. I'm like, okay, yeah.
Okay, so how is it when you go back home? Do you find that you have to educate people? Because I do know in Kenya there's also that bias against religion biases, and some people find that my religion is better than yours. How is
Mhm.
that?
So, and I said this too in another space of when you're in the States, someone asked, how are you met with when people encounter you? And I said, well, there's this curiosity, and naturally so, because like I said, I think there are a handful number of us here. I know we're not the only ones, but again, it's more of, oh, your turban looks beautiful. Oh, show me how to wrap it. I've had women stop me countless of times in
Wow.
Walmart, yes, or at the mall,
Yes.
and they're just really curious about how do I bring it back, tuck
Yes.
it in, and it still stands.
Yeah.
And so that's stateside,
Mm.
right? And then going back home where there's that familiarity, and I think this is where that context of the biblical verse of familiarity breeds contempt. For most of the Kenyan people, they at least have one idea of the Akorino people,
Mm.
hopefully positive, but most of the time it's negative in the sense of either boxing in.
Yes.
Um, and I think maybe I could meet them halfway and say, yes, it isn't good to box people in, but at the same time, if this is all you're seeing and it's affirming that belief, then there can be that unconscious bias
Hmm.
to say, well, this is all they do. Because, okay, maybe I live, in Gishagi, I almost said shags, but
Yes.
most people understand.
Yeah.
And the Aquino family that I know of, they're very good people, but they sell meat.
Yeah.
Okay, but it takes removing somebody from that environment to see beyond. So in doing that physically, that's one way to reduce the unconscious bias. There's also that mental aspect of, okay, being removed from that environment, Akorino people are more than just people who sell meat or people who are carpenters or preachers, although those are definite roles and we can back that with facts from what people see. But again, it comes from being removed from that environment and just expanding your horizons.
Mhm.
And so that is something that I think is global, that we have to teach everyone and say, although this is what you see, right? These are the lenses of what you see in a specific cultural group. You have to be willing to expand and grow from that.
Yeah.
So to go back to your question, I would say for the Kenyan people is asking questions. Maybe the meat seller that you see maybe has a daughter who is in business.
Yeah.
Or how do you not know that they are a business owner? But maybe that's just they don't want to be in the suit and tie. So there are a lot of different contexts to this. But in some, I'm met with maybe just a staunch kind of questioning of how did you end up here, looks, nonverbal cues that I think speak louder, that can let someone know this person is really questioning whether I have the intelligence to be here.
Yeah.
And so what I've done in those moments and what my parents have taught me is you don't need to justify. You can let the facts speak for themselves, because if I'm already there, then
Yes.
that means I'm qualified. So what I'm going to do is give you the benefit of the doubt, and as I'm talking, as you're experiencing me wherever it is that you've met me, I hope those barriers fall down during my uh, existence, during my engaging with you, whether that is personal face to face or just within a crowd.
That's beautiful. I like the way you all handle this because you handle it with grace, and it's really all about, okay, let me educate you. And it is global. It's just not one region. It's just not in Kenya. Global. These unconscious biases are everywhere. All right, very good. So let's talk about your book, Seated. The title is Seated, The Journey to My Becoming. Please give me the title. Give us the title because I don't have the book here, but I listened to it on Kindle. So
Oh,
what's the name?
good. Yes, you can get it on Kindle, by the way. Did you hear that?
Yes.
um, yes, it seeded my journey to becoming. And I remember when I was in the book writing process, and I was in the phase of, I wrote the book. I knew this is what I was going to write about.
Okay.
And I wanted to save the title last. And I don't know, God speaks in the most random places. I'm taking a shower and I could just see seated across. And I was just like, okay,
Okay.
we're starting somewhere. And I knew I wanted becoming.
Okay.
That stems from Michelle Obama's book. And I just loved that word, right? Becoming it's endless,
Yes.
you can go through phases. But I was hit with the oxymoron of how do you sit and become?
Mm.
So I hope I'm not going ahead of the questions,
No,
but
no,
that
go
is,
ahead. Tell us. Yeah.
yeah, but then that's what really aligned the book, because that was my story, is I had to learn to sit and let God show me what he had planned for me. But as I was sitting, I was becoming, because in the book, I make an equation, and becoming equals courage, right? And
Mhm.
vulnerability divided by empathy.
Oh,
So
I like that.
I'm
Yeah.
picturing that. I'm like, oh my, I hope I'm saying that correctly. But I do know this, that number one, the step is you have to have courage to
Yes.
become. You have to go to those spaces and events that maybe have left you stagnant. So the book is meeting you at a space where maybe you have lost hope deferred, you've stopped dreaming, and you encounter this book seated. Well, okay, the first step is courage. Address those places, those events that hurt you. Then as you're having the courage, you need to have vulnerability, because the courage to start is great,
Yes.
but if you're not vulnerable with yourself, you're not going to be true. Um, you may just say, "Oh yeah, they hurt me. Oh yeah, yeah, I probably do need to forget them. Okay, I'm done. On to the next step." No, be vulnerable enough to say, I'm glossing over something. I
Yes.
need to go deeper. I need to get to the root of these things. As you're doing that, have empathy, right? Because when you start navigating vulnerable, painful areas,
Mhm.
there can be that blame, there can be that shame and guilt. And so empathy is more of saying, Priscilla, you conquered this. Look at you. Like, you're being brave. Okay, all right, let's keep going. And
Mhm.
the more you continue having that vulnerability, it's a cycle: courage, vulnerability, empathy. Then
Mhm.
you find yourself, now you don't have to kind of self-talk yourself into it. You're flourishing,
Yes.
right? You start noticing, you know what? It's easier to, I don't know, go somewhere and dress up. It's easier to give a speech. It's easier to do some things that you really have to talk yourself to and pray and beg God to help you.
Yeah.
In that flourishing, then you start becoming,
Um,
because you're in that space of, okay, this new you, new look.
yes.
And then it just now becomes automatic. So now you've become this person, and it's now second nature to you. You kind of move from an unconscious incompetence to a conscious competence, right? Where you know that I can do this without having to have these steps. And I tell someone who's reading the book, the reader, once you hit that phase of becoming, you don't just stop there. You can celebrate that
Okay.
state. So, someone who overcame cancer, right? They definitely went through a becoming process.
Right.
So, they're going to celebrate their healing. And that may last a year or 2 years or more. But then that phase will soon end, because there's another level of becoming,
Right.
right? And so that's what I encourage the reader to do, is don't just feel like, oh, I'm done, because that can make you go back,
Go back.
right?
It's stuck.
Exactly. Now you have to start that cycle all over again. But no, it's just saying, I've overcome this. All right, the next step, the next
Yes.
step. So
Yes.
in the um, that was another reason why my sister-in-law Cecilia, she did the photography for the front cover. The stairs were very intentional.
Okay.
Because you're climbing from a level, you're becoming, it's showing that action of sitting, but I'm sitting on steps. So, yeah.
Beautiful. That's so beautiful. That sounds very much sort of like you self-coach. You
Yeah.
ask yourself questions. Is this true? So when I like that courage, vulnerability, and empathy, and really going through those steps of, okay, ask yourself questions and really self-coaching, self-coaching. That's beautiful. So now, why is it that you wrote the book, though?
So I didn't plan to write the book. I've noticed how God works in my life is very much boom moments that I don't have time to think rationally because I'll talk my way out of it, or find a reasoning, an intellectual moving reasoning to not do it.
Yeah.
And so my publisher, Roy Kamau, I was on social media and I saw that he had just helped someone self-publish. And I was like, oh, wow, he's doing so great. This is probably his, fifth author? I was just like, oh, wow. And I remember God saying, okay, your turn. I said, excuse me?
My turn.
And I'm laying on the couch. I think I was eating ice cream. And I was like, no, this is great. There's something happening in my life. Let
Okay.
me just celebrate others.
Yes.
And so it was again, no, you need to write a book. And so, of course, God, one thing I've learned true and throughout my walk with Jesus is he's not going to ask us to do easy things. Um, it may seem easy to someone who, to them, it's not a challenge because each of us have different, things we need to do that God requires of us. And so for me to write a book, I was like, what are you talking about? Wait, I don't know. I don't even know if I have a story. So anyway, I reached out to Roy, and one thing I like about his publishing company is it's Christian based.
Okay.
And so, of course, not to say anyone else cannot join, but knowing my story, knowing me, we were able to really talk about it and pray and say, okay, let's give ourselves that time, come back together, and then this is a step in how we're going to do this. So I wrote the book, and I prayed and I told God, Holy Spirit, you're going to have to reveal to me places and areas that I honestly don't even remember, because I can write the book. The confidence was there to say, okay, from Kenya to United States, my family did great things. God is great.
Yes.
But in between that, I really was like, Holy Spirit, you're going to have to help me. And so in each chapter, literally, it's God breathed, on the book, because I would find myself just writing and having, in that moment of writing, God was also healing through me, because I was like, oh, wow, this is where you were. Wow, I'm looking back at 5 years old. This is where, goodness, you have been there this whole time.
Yes.
So, and also just very specific too. God calls you to do something, he's going to give you the rules. And if, not directly, but throughout your journey, he will.
Yeah.
So as I started writing and I'm going forward, because I knew the book can't just be 2 chapters. So I'm writing.
Yes.
And I remember, hearing clearly, I want 10 chapters. What?
Wow.
Okay. Yes. And so that was nice because structure's given. Okay, great.
Yes.
And then it got time to naming the chapters. And I think this is where, of course, now practically he connected me to people who could kind of see that perspective. And so even naming the chapters is very intentional as well. And then the fun part came to getting the book cover, right? So the hard part's done. It's sent to exactly. It's sent to the reviewers. I could relax and celebrate that I was done. But the hard work begins to now plan a marketing phase. The book cover needs to be ASAP if we're marketing something. And so then this is where the clothes come in. I was connected to one of, a fashion designer, Shanzi, kudos to her. And she sewed this amazing gown and a few others. I had this vision because, again, the title has come, becoming everything, and I was like, oh, I want to be like a queen seated in a chair. So I had this. I even had the chair already, like in our garage to do the photo shoot.
Okay.
Clothes were late. So my sister-in-law is telling me, I can only be here for these few amounts of time because she also has photo shoots to do. And if I'm wanting to publish and market this in August, it's April. We need to get this going. Well, the clothes are not here.
Mm.
And I had to, believe it or not, I ordered the dress from Amazon,
Oh,
and a maternity dress. So it's one of those stretchy ones. So
okay.
it's stick. And I think you've probably, if people have seen the maternity shoots, they're just plain colored,
Yes.
stretchy material. And it was black. So I was like, okay. And then I'm we're texting with my sister-in-law, and I'm like, I think I have an idea in my head.
Okay.
Okay, so you want to do the shoot? Because it's the only day I can do it. Yes, they fly in. And I found the kente that's wrapped on me
Yeah.
with a blanket.
Oh
A
my
blanket.
goodness, you're very creative.
Yes. Now I had worn it before for an event, but it's heavy. It's also very heavy. So because I didn't want to throw it away,
Yes.
where it draped here at the other event, I just kind of removed the cinching and I just folded it into a blanket and I put it in my closet. And I said, well, the dress is black. This is somehow because I wanted to also highlight the Africanness,
Mm.
right, of myself.
Yes.
So then, okay, we do the photo shoot, we get to the place, and I just remember sitting there, and that photo that's on the cover, my face is actually me being frustrated.
Oh,
And my sister-in-law was just like, she actually was like, you know what? Because I had it draped like I did with another gown. She
yeah.
goes, no, 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 let's just drape it off your shoulder. And I was like, okay. So I'm just letting her take creative action. But she knew, even in my mind, I'm just like, this is not my vision. Like, I'm not, when you don't have what you want, you're not going to exude it in the photos.
Oh,
But I believe looking back that God was like, if you're going to call other people to become, then
yes.
you need to go through your own process,
And then do
right?
it. Yes. Mm.
Exactly. So photo turns out great, but that was honestly just me. I think she was doing something on her camera and she told me to hold the pose. And so I knew I wasn't being photographed, but I was just like, God, I'm annoyed. Like, why is this happening? And I didn't know she was testing or still taking.
Yeah.
And then that was one of the shots. The next day, my
Your,
clothes come in.
your clothes come in. Well, they're coming from Kenya.
Yeah.
Oh,
But it had nothing to do with the shipment and nothing. It just, God said, I'm going to delay because he
yes.
also is something that is, contrary to belief, he can delay for a
Again.
good reason because he's working everything out for our good.
Yeah.
And so the clothes came in the next day, and my sister-in-law was like, well, let's just get another shot,
Okay.
because you can still market this, you can just have it in your files. And so I got to do the shoot that I had in my mind.
Okay. And so on the book cover, what is it then? The clothes that arrived from Kenya.
No, no, sorry.
The
So the book
original.
cover is the Amazon
Oh,
dress
wow. Yes.
and the blanket. But so when I presented all the photos to my publisher, because again, it's for him to choose,
Yes.
um, I was like, oh, these are just part of the file, but these are the ones that I really would like. And he was like, no, no. I said, what? And I mean, not to say they weren't good, they were great, but again, I'm looking at the attire.
Right.
And he goes, Priscilla, there's something powerful about this. And so we talked through it, and I just remember still being frustrated, but I said, you know what? I, I'm forgetting that it's not about me.
Yeah.
It is, I'm writing about me, but it has nothing to do with me because God asked me to do this for him to get the glory. And
Yeah.
so one thing I learned through that is being careful to just get out of God's way.
That's so well said. Get out of God's way because you did. And that cover, it looks so beautiful. That picture is perfect. No one would think that you went through all this, what you're describing. So it is just perfect. So let's talk about now the Miss Kenya USA pageant that you went through. Walk us a little bit about that. And it's exciting and congratulations again. So
so much.
tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so shortly after the book, 2021, now I was really just marketing it, doing a lot with that, interviews. And then at that time, where are we? my time frame. 2021 to 22 was all about seated. Then 2023 came along, and I had a friend say, "Oh my goodness, Miss Kenya's back." I said, "Miss Kenya," and she was like, "Yeah, they're back. They're doing the pageant." Now, I remember hearing about the queen that had won. She's a good friend of mine, in 2019, if I'm correct, because during COVID they just stopped.
Okay.
And I was like, "Oh wow, wow, okay." So she tells me that, she goes, "Oh, you should think about it." I said, "We'll see, but thank you so much." So again, laying on the couch.
Hmm. We should be laying on this couch. That's where you
True.
get your ideas.
Exactly. Sometimes I lay there and I'm like, "God, please." So I'm just, again, social media, I see people talking about it, I'm like, "Oh great." God goes, "Apply." I'm like, "Lord." It's not that I can't, but I just have never had a desire. Nothing negative, nothing positive. I would rather go and see than perform.
Okay.
So I did it, and I remember applying. Just again, it wasn't like God said, "Oh, write this." It was more of, well, the obvious is there. I've written a book. Um, my goal is mental health, to empower, African immigrant youth, and talking about places and interviews that I've done. And I hope to take this platform and use it to also just continue empowering Kenyan youth,
Yeah.
within the diaspora. So I submit. I sent in a photo. Again, it was very much like the pieces were there.
Yes.
So I just obeyed. And I said, "All right, God, well, this was an easy quote to me, easy application," because I, again, had come from seated. So after a while, you're used to kind of telling that story.
Mhm.
But I was definitely able to add more on the mental health piece. I submit, and I forgot about it, because to me, it was just like, all right, I've crossed that off. Maybe that's just all he wanted. And then a few months later, I get an email, "You've been chosen." I said, "What?" How do I break how do I break this news to my family? What does this look like? And again, the little knowledge I had about pageants, I'm thinking I'm gonna have to get a big dress. I'm gonna have to learn how to do a dance. My my thought of pageants was Miss Congeniality.
Okay. Oh, I see.
Great movie. I love it.
Okay.
But that's what it felt like. I was just like, "Oh my Lord, I'm Gracie Lou Freebush." So God was gracious enough, because again, when he calls you to it, he gives you the steps, he gives you the
Yes.
inspiration. And so for every piece of the segment, God told me what to do. And um, I also didn't have to incur as many costs, because my evening gown was one of the dresses that had come in late from seated.
Okay. There was a
So
purpose for it.
yep, there was. And I remember that was my favorite dress. It wasn't the one for the book cover, but it was one of the interview dresses, or something that I was going to wear.
Yes.
Very formal. And I just remember being like, "No, this is my special dress. I'm going to save it." And I just didn't have events to wear it to. And then I remember when I would try, very rarely, I would just hear God say no. And I'm like, "What?" But okay. So I didn't think anything of it. There was nothing pressuring me to wear it then. So I just put it in the back of my closet. So I now take it to Miss Kenya. I do all of this, the segments, cultural segment, the swimsuit segment. There
Mhm.
was one which I was going to sit out of, because I just was like, "No, that's not me."
Okay.
And I don't know if what the standards are. But one thing I love about Miss Kenya is you show up as you are.
Okay.
And
Huh?
I would advocate for anybody to be a part of that pageant, because they're not there to change you. Yes, there's structure,
Okay.
evening swimsuit talent, but you dress in the way that's comfortable for you.
Okay. So
Um,
how did that look like for you, the swimsuit?
yeah, so it looked like a sarong. I wrapped a sarong. I think I did, like, it's like a swimsuit shorts.
Mm.
And so yeah, and then I did like a black tank. So it was very much the swimsuit vibe of, I'm thinking of getting in the water, but I don't know.
I like that. Very creative, Priscilla.
If
Okay.
you're telling me to show up as I am, and I know there's different scenarios that happen at a beach or a swimming pool, I'm just gonna wear the outfit that says I'm here. I'm just sitting. I have my fan, my kyondo,
Yes.
and so that's how I did it. Then the evening gown, the talent, the cultural segment, which I knew for sure God had even told me what to wear, what song to dance to. And from that, that's what got me the Cultural Ambassador Award, is because, again, bringing in so many pieces of who I was.
Yes.
I remember walking by one of the judges, and she said, she's representing her people.
Oh,
Look, you could see her people in the dress. And I almost wanted to cry and wink at her, but I was like, no, play it cool, keep walking. But I wanted each piece that I wore to speak of the Akorino people because, again, I was literally the first to represent ever. And so I had to do it well, not from a place of pressure, sure, a good pressure, but I wanted even parents to look back and say, look, she did it well. My
mhm.
daughter can. So if parents even had hesitations because of the Akorino upbringing and modesty, the daughters could then say, look at her though.
Yes.
Look at the photos. She won and she did it and did not embarrass herself or bring her faith down.
That's beautiful. And you did a good job doing that and representing. That was just so beautiful. So now, my listeners and most of the people that I work with, they are, professional. They're very talented. Some of them are in professions, and some of them are aspiring entrepreneurs, but they hold themselves back. Now, have you ever it doesn't sound like you've ever held yourself back, Priscilla. What are the strategies that you can share with them to put themselves out there and, use their God-given talents and be the best versions of themselves like you have?
Right. Have held myself back in some way. I will say, I think there was a time God was hiding me. Um, and then I became comfortable being hidden. So I think that's one thing to discern too, is God does hide us, but in that we can kind of be like, oh, it's been comfortable,
Mhm.
being in your graces, being in your space and not really having to interact. But what I had to learn was there are people's breakthroughs that are waiting on your story.
Mm.
And so sometimes you have to show up even when you don't want to, even when you're uncomfortable and you'd rather just be. Honestly, something that people may not believe about me is um, I really do like to spend a lot of time alone, even though I'm very extroverted. But it's because I think also when you have a great gift, when you do give and people want to learn from you, God has had to teach me to kind of pull back sometimes and restructure, then go back out. It's a rhythm. We sing about it, rhythms of grace. It really is rhythms of grace. So to the people that have held themselves back and maybe feel comfortable being in the shadows, you have to start somewhere. Um, and I would say start, because then when you start, God doesn't punish in starting, because then when you do, he's either going to tell you, not yet, or keep going. But you have to give an action, right? God moves with action, and then he'll tell you when he doesn't want action. And
Yeah.
so I would say be in spaces, whether it's networking, meet people. If you've been wanting to write a book, write a book. Uh, there are a lot of spaces to self-publish. If you're wanting to start a podcast, again, so I was telling someone the other day, there are so many podcasts, and you would think
Yeah.
that too much now is too much, but no, each podcast has a listener, has a
Right.
group of people. We're talking about 8 billion, probably plus
Yeah.
soon
Yes.
in the earth. You can't cover all of the topics and all of the personalities and all of the nitty gritty things that people like. There are people who have podcasts for ants, literally. People podcast for chefs. And I think it goes to show that there's a space for everyone.
It's enough for
And
everyone. Mhm.
exactly. And so I would say to the people there that I'm talking to is start somewhere and know your why, know why you're doing it. Um, because if it's okay to want to feel good about yourself, but don't let that blur the vision of you getting the praise instead of God, or it being more about you and less about the people that you're impacting.
Oh, that's so beautiful. So action, take action, take
Just
action.
start. Even if it's going to the gym, maybe you, I don't know, want to create a workout routine. Start somewhere.
Start somewhere.
For a marathon and you want to vlog it and invite people to your journey, start somewhere. I'm starting to train. I'm going to do a marathon in 6 months. Do something.
Do something. I love that. The idea of take action, because really that's the, just taking the next best action, just taking that one foot in front of the other. That's the only way you start. And I read this book by James Clear. It's about atomic habits, and it says just take 1% of an action, just 1%. So if you want to run a marathon, remove your sneakers, wear them, put them on, and then take just run around the block, and eventually you're going to find yourself running a marathon.
Yes.
Yeah.
It starts somewhere. And even for me, it was writing the book. I just had to start and I said, okay, well, let me kind of make it a story from when I was born. That was the easiest way to do it. Because sometimes people will write books on a specific event and kind of live in that area.
Yeah.
But to me, for me to make sense and build structure, like again, like tying my shoes, I said, all right, well, I was born on this day. And this is my family. This is how we were raised. And then the story builds on itself to coming to the States and etc. So starting somewhere.
Thanks, Samuel. It's a journey. It's a journey. Now, is there anything that, before I ask you where my listeners can find you, and I have appreciated this talk, is there anything else that we left out that you would want my listeners to learn or hear?
I think I would say be okay with not being okay. I know that's a very cliche statement as you are processing who you are, what you want to do. And in that not being okay, finding ways to get help, finding ways to take care of your wellness. Mental health is a big thing, especially as you are daring to begin, um, battling those self-defeating beliefs. So I would say maybe write them down and say, what is something that I believe about myself that's negative, and how can I turn that into a positive? So those maybe just some tips to give as people start this journey.
Yes.
And you can find me on Facebook. It's Wamboy Pris. I know. And on Instagram, if you use Instagram, I flipped it. It's Pris_Wamboy.
Okay, so we will put all those contacts in our show notes. How about the book? Where can we find the book, and where can we find you? Now, do you work one-on-one? Because I do know that you do work with, you said with the youth on mental health. Do you work on one-on-one? How can we find you and work with you?
Right, right. So the book you can find on Amazon. You just type in Seated. I would do Seated Priscilla Wachira or Seated My Journey to Becoming. And then in regards to youth, right now, as I mentioned, I'm doing my PhD, so that's really taking a lot of my time. However, I do I guess you could say informal forms of counseling, because yes, I'm still licensed.
Okay.
If there are youth who would like to just talk about some things, and maybe we can figure out, okay, how do we launch you now into therapy, or do you even need therapy? Or even coming to speak at events, if I do that, whether it's just a parents conference or a youth conference, I can be of attendance. I love panels, I love workshops. So yeah, available to do that. And you can reach me there via email. It's wachira.priscilla75@gmail.com.
Beautiful. Priscilla, you're such a delight to talk to. You
you.
are such a delight. I thank you so much for even just this time that you've shared so much wisdom, so many nuggets. And I look forward to talking to you soon.
Yes,
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
you are welcome. Thank you.
So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this conversation between Priscilla and myself. I've had the pleasure of interviewing Priscilla, her sister Elizabeth, and her brother David. And if you haven't watched those conversations, please go back and watch the interviews that I've had with her siblings. They are such a delight. And it's so nice to sit down with them and talk about their journey and just be inspired. So leave a comment and let me know what your takeaway was. And until next time, take care.